Professor, what made you want to teach herbology?
How lovely of you to ask. I've always had an affinity for greenery, so this situation is a bit of a dream come true. After graduation, I was thrilled to be asked to step in for my old herbology professor. He'd had a slight accident, you see.
Oh dear. A shame for him, but it worked out well for you.
Well, he never cared, really cared for the plants, and they could sense it. Oh, you'd be surprised how perceptive a plant can be. At any rate, the trouble began one day when he cut into a wigan tree. Unfortunately for him, its leaves were hiding a bowtruckle. You may recall the marvellous creatures that resemble a twig. The little beast gouged the professor's eyes quite fiercely, but terrifying, I'd imagine. Likely for the professor, too.
And that's when you took over as the herbology professor?
Well, not quite. After 3 weeks at St. Mungo's, my predecessor regained a tiny bit of his eyesight. He insisted on returning to the greenhouse. Within a week, he claims by accident, kicked a Chinese chomping cabbage, so it was back to St. Mungo's for him.
What a string of bad luck.
Well, I felt awful for him, but I dare say I felt a bit more sympathy for the cabbage. Upon his discharge from the hospital, his indifference to plants had turned to utter disdain. He lost what little patience he had left with a particularly temperamental venomous tentacula and, well, his resulting leave of absence continues to this day.
I'm glad everything worked out as it did and that you're the herbology professor now.
Very kind of you to say. I do love these gardens and helping my students grow. Lovely speaking with you. Have a wonderful day. Oh, and remember, be kind to your wigan trees.
Professor, I was wondering where you're from. What's your background?
Oh, how nice of you to ask. Well, let's see. I grew up in London, right on the Thames.
That sounds lovely. All the sights and bustle of a city.
To some, yes. I used to dream of living in the country, but it wasn't until I came to Hogwarts that I felt truly at home. Mind you, it did take some time, and whilst it is my fervent hope that each student eventually feels as at home here as I do, it is not always the case.
I suppose that makes sense.
Well, we each bloom differently, don't we? Some of us, like Devil's Snare, thrive in the shadows, whilst others crave the attention of a bouncing bulb. And we each grow and thrive according to our own plan. Oh, I was terribly nervous when I arrived at the castle. You see, as a child, I knew nothing of witches or wizards. You can imagine how astonished I was to receive my letter from Hogwarts. I spent a good deal of time alone in either the greenhouse or the library my first days here.
It does take a while to adjust to being here.
Precisely, and I was remarkably fortunate. In fact, a 7th year took me under her wing during those first days. She remains one of my dearest friends.
How fortunate.
I was indeed. I dare say you'll find that the friends you make here at Hogwarts will last a lifetime. Now, I'd best get to my recent delivery from the Magic Neep. Mr. Teasdale promised me quite an assortment of seeds this week. Lovely to see you.
Professor, do you have a moment?
I do.
May I ask what attracted you to astronomy?
You may. Might I assume from your inquiry that you wonder how anyone may have an interest in astronomy?
Oh, not at all, Professor. I find it intriguing and wanted to know more about your work.
Ah, that is good to hear. So often those who do not fully understand all that can be gleaned from the stars question astronomy's relevance. Misperceptions frequently arise due to the confusion of astronomy with astrology, the ridiculousness of which I shall not deign to discuss. To answer your question, it was my dear sister who first sparked my interest in stargazing. The two of us spent countless nights on our rooftop staring at the cosmos. It was one of the only subjects we could study together.
I'm not sure I follow, Professor. Why was that?
My sister is a squib. Clever, hard-working, and generous, but a squib nonetheless. The only non-magical child born to our family in generations, poor thing. Although she manages exceptionally well.
It sounds as if she's a lovely person and accomplished.
She is. And to her credit, while she was once disappointed not to attend Hogwarts, she has excelled in Muggle school. One of the first women, we suspect, to have attended Cambridge, well disguised at the time by our mother as a gentleman scholar. And as astronomy is one subject shared between the Muggle world and ours, she and I have been able to maintain that common interest. We still sneak up to a rooftop now and then to gaze upwards, courtesy of a levitation charm rather than a trellis nowadays.
Thank you for telling me about your sister, Professor.
I was glad to. It is good to be reminded of all that one can accomplish when one embraces who one is. Now off you go. I am sure you've a star chart to review somewhere.
During class, you mentioned the Toyohashi Quidditch team.
I did. The Toyohashi Tengu are from Japan. Dominant, known for their rigorous training. They practice near the Mahutokoro School of Magic, often battling both tempestuous seas and violent storms, in addition to each other. Tournament play is almost always easier for the Tengu than their training sessions.
I take it you're a fan.
Fan? I was being groomed to play on their team. And I would have been a Tengu, if not for a bit of bad luck.
I know that feeling. Some things are simply out of our control.
And some things are in it. I should have known better. I made my own luck. I was betrayed by someone I trusted. Myself. I did not see clearly and I paid a dear price. My best friend Asuka and I were being groomed to play on the team together. I as keeper and she as chaser. She was breathtaking. She once corkscrewed through 3 players and scored before they even turned their heads. But as tryouts for the Tengu got closer, she panicked. I did not realize the extent of her panic until it was too late. She wanted so desperately for both of us to play together that she had slipped Felix Felicis into our tea before we were to show them our skills.
What is Felix Felicis? A potion?
Also known as liquid luck. And it is illegal in all wizarding sports. I knew within minutes that something was different. I had never played so well. And Asuka was playing more beautifully than I had ever seen. When I confronted her afterwards, she admitted what she had done. I withdrew from consideration immediately.
But it wasn't your fault. You didn't know about the potion in the tea.
It does not matter. My flying that day was not my own. I could not live with myself. So, I withdrew and explained to them why. I burned my broom in disgrace.
What happened to Asuka? Did she burn her broom as well?
Asuka played for the Tengu for 2 seasons.
You didn't report her? Tell them what she'd done?
Her fate was not mine to decide. My fate is in my hands, as your fate is in yours.
Thank you, Professor. I shall remember what you've told me. Professor, I wondered if I could ask how you came to Hogwarts.
I suppose that is not an unexpected question. After I told you about my time in Mahutokoro, it was a simple matter of fate, really. After my experience with the Toyohashi Tengu, I was determined to find work that would fulfill me. I accepted a position with the Japanese Ministry of Magic. I cannot tell you the specifics of my work. A few years into my post, I had the honor of working with Professor Weasley, at the time a curse breaker for the British Ministry.
Professor Weasley was a curse breaker for the Ministry.
She was. But I would advise you not to inquire upon it. She is quite clear that her focus is now Hogwarts. We coordinated, shall we say, defensive efforts on a particular matter, and were talking one evening about the rigors of our respective positions. She mentioned plans to return to Britain and Hogwarts specifically. I noted I could appreciate her decision. Her description of the school was so enchanting that when she wrote to me a few years later about the open position of flying professor, I was intrigued.
I suppose I can understand wanting to move on from all that you went through with the Tengu.
But that is not at all what happened. I was not moving on. What happened will always be a part of me. I learned from it. My reason for coming to Hogwarts was to expand my horizons.
Then you enjoy being a flying instructor, even after all that happened?
I do. And not despite all that happened, but because of it. You would do well to let lessons be just that, lessons. Learn from your errors, in judgment or otherwise. I am proud to impart such knowledge upon students, no matter where in the globe they may reside.
Professor, do you have time to chat?
I always have time for my students. How may I help you?
I wondered if I might ask how long you've been teaching at Hogwarts.
Well, it's been what now? 7 swift years. Time does fly because we have fun. Essential in my opinion. An eager, positive, and confident mind is the most open to knowledge, I find.
Some of the professors may not agree with your approach.
Well, each of us has our own style, I suppose. Some in the teaching field believe that hard work and dedication are the only keys to success. But they forget what drives those things. If one cannot fathom why some would expend energy on gobstones, then one is blind to the enormous power of play.
And that's why you teach the way you do?
Precisely. I strive to be the sort of professor that I would have enjoyed in school. My experience was less cheerful.
I'm sorry to hear that, sir. It sounds as if your experience as a student was less than ideal.
Had I received a more traditional education, well, enough about my student days. You are here now, and it would be a shame if you didn't enjoy it.
I'll do my best, Professor. Thank you for the advice.
You are most welcome. Try to have a bit of fun today. Huh?
Professor, what did you mean when you said your education wasn't traditional?
I had bet myself a butterbeer you'd be back to ask about that. It seems I've earned myself a trip to the 3 broomsticks. My father insisted rather adamantly that fun had no place when it came to learning. I struggled with his rather Socratic method of teaching, made no progress with even the simplest spells until I made a game of it. As the process itself became a source of joy, I was able to better retain what I was being taught. I realized then how much fun was to be had in learning, and I decided to become a professor so that I may pass that joy along.
I, for one, am glad. I very much enjoy your class.
Delighted to hear. Now, I shall not keep you from your studies, nor time with your fellow students, both of which are invaluable to your education.
Professor, do you have a moment?
I do.
I was wondering how you decided to teach divination.
The art of divination is an important yet often misunderstood branch of magic. Those of us who possess the sight are rare, and, as is often the case with the unique among us, we can frequently be misread, even feared. When I was granted the opportunity to teach others about my gift and the good it can do, I was most grateful.
I see. Natty told me that you and she moved here from Uganda, where she had attended Wagadu.
Yes, Natsai and I both loved Uganda and Wagadu, but we are happily settled here now. I had foreseen such a change, but did not know the details until it occurred. I was glad of the outcome. You would be wise to remember that the consequences of our actions are complex. And so, divining what is to come is not as simple as gazing into a crystal ball or studying the bottom of a teacup.
I find it truly intriguing, even if I don't fully understand it.
Intriguing. That is one word for it. And I'm certain you will come to understand many things more deeply in the days ahead. You are a student at Hogwarts, after all. It cannot have escaped you that we in the Wizarding world are forever navigating the seemingly inexplicable.
Of course, Professor.
Now, I know that we both have places to be. Not because I have the sight, mind you, but because I am a professor and you are a student. I have enjoyed our conversation.
Professor Sharp, do you have a moment?
Depends on how you intend to use it.
I saw an aura badge on your desk and was wondering if you could tell me more about your time as an aura.
Observant. I suppose I could indulge you for a moment. Spent years tracking down reprobates who dealt in artifacts of dark magic origin.
That sounds positively exhilarating.
Exhilarating? It was at that. While it lasted, at any rate. I enjoyed a great deal of success as an aura. However, success can make one complacent if one's confidence is not tempered by humility. One overstep in battle changed everything.
May I ask what happened?
Yes, well, I suppose it's a matter of record. My partner and I had tracked a suspect to a harbor in Scarborough, trying to smuggle shrunken heads of all things. I had deduced that he was working alone. I was mistaken, and they knew we were coming. From the moment we stepped onto the ship, well, I barely escaped with my life. My partner wasn't so lucky.
I suppose being an aura is dreadfully dangerous. I'm sorry.
It is at that. But survival is not guaranteed for any of us. Pay attention. And not just within my class. This is what I must impress upon you all. A potion and a poison may be a mere breath apart, until you consume the wrong one.
Well said, Professor. Professor, do you have a moment to speak again?
You do realize I have classes to teach. Very well. How may I assist you?
Why did you leave your position as an aura to come to Hogwarts?
Perhaps you haven't heard the myriad rumors they think I don't hear.
Was it due to a particular interest in potions?
I am in fact an expert in potions, however my interest was not the reason I came to Hogwarts. I would still be an aura today if my injury hadn't precluded it. The Ministry was all too ready to keep me on. Buried under parchment, of course, helping run the aura recruitment program. But if I'm meant for a life confined to a desk, well, I might as well share my expertise, while searching for a way to heal my blasted leg. And the Hogwarts Library is not to be underestimated.
You're seeking to heal the damage done to your leg?
As I said, lest you think for a moment that fear played any role in my departure, allow me to enlighten you. It was not fear, but fate that steered my hand.
I'll not let fear dictate my future either.
Well said. However, it's worth noting that fear can be a great motivator, and that one must conquer it.
Indeed, sir. Thank you for your time. And I do hope you find a cure for your injury.
Yes. Well, I'm certain you have an empty cauldron waiting for you somewhere.
Yes, Professor. Of course. Professor, might I have a moment?
Yes. What is it?
I was wondering what inspired your interest in magical beasts.
Are you considering some sort of profession in the field?
I haven't decided quite yet, but I do find magical beasts fascinating.
You do seem to engage well with the beasts in class. I believe that when choosing a path, particularly of a scholarly nature, one must take into account both one's enthusiasm for a particular subject, as well as how one may best serve the students to whom one is obligated to both inspire and teach.
Of course, Professor. When did your path become clear?
I recall it quite vividly. It was the summer between my 6th and 7th years. I read in the Prophet about a wizard who'd been selling alchemy eggs and disappeared in the mountains near my home. I knew of the alchemy, of course, from my studies, but they are native to lands east of here, such as India. I wondered if it was possible that an alchemy could be so nearby. Hence, I went to find it.
What type of beast is an alchemy?
It is a spectacular beast. A feathered, winged serpent-like creature that can grow or shrink to fit a particular space. Its eggs are made of pure silver, hence the desire to trade in them.
Seems quite a challenge finding an alchemy in the mountains.
It was. After a few days, during which my parents grew increasingly annoyed at my absence, I found what little remained of the wizard egg trader. He was near a tree hollow. And there, inside, was a nest with 7 silver alchemy eggs.
What did you do with them?
Nothing. Beasts are to be valued for what they can provide for wizard kind. Protective clothing, potion ingredients, even wand cores. Only poachers see the value in ending a beast's life for galleons. I left the eggs alone. I hid. And moments later, the beast flew right over my head. Breathtaking. She then seemed to all but disappear as she shrunk to fit into the hollow.
That sounds incredible.
Indeed. I knew in that moment that I needed to understand all that I could about beasts and ensure that wizard kind learned to benefit properly from them. Now, I trust that I have answered your question. You would do well to continue your study of beasts, regardless of your chosen path. Beasts and all that they provide will vastly improve your life, and perhaps one day even save it.
I shall remember that, Professor. Thank you. Professor, what can you tell me about your work at the Ministry?
Your curiosity is understandable. Well, although I can't speak in any detail of my work, I can tell you certain interesting facts. Unspeakables work in the Ministry's Department of Mysteries. Dangerous work at times, as you've no doubt guessed.
Yes, Professor.
Now, you needn't concern yourself with my injury. I made peace long ago with the fact that a sprig of dittany, once plucked, will surely begin to wilt.
You do seem to have come to terms with things rather well.
It's a matter of perspective. Without saying more, perhaps whatever time I've lost was an exchange for time gained, and to dwell on such matters is a waste of the days ahead. At this point, no magic permits us to travel back in time. Perhaps one day. Yes, I can tell you that my years at the Ministry were well spent. And I'm as happy to be at Hogwarts now as I was to be in the Department of Mysteries years ago.
If I may, Professor, I'm also happy that you're here at Hogwarts now.
Kind of you to say. Speaking of time, perhaps yours would be best spent honing your defensive wand work.
Yes, Professor. Professor, do you have a moment?
I do. What is it?
I wondered, did you attend Hogwarts?
I did. I am a proud member of Ravenclaw House. Why do you ask?
I was curious as to how Hogwarts has changed over the years.
I see. Well, the castle itself, as I'm sure you have surmised, is full of surprises. I dare say more than the staircases change around here. As for the students, well, they seem to get more capable every year. Although, we got up to just as much mischief in my day as you seem to now. I used to look the other way at all sorts of roguery when I was head girl. I can tell you, however, that I did once admonish a certain Phineas Nigellus Black for enjoying a sugar quill during a lecture.
I hadn't realized that you and Professor Black were, students here together.
Appearances can be deceiving. You see, I was once wounded by time itself.
Time itself? I never would have imagined such a thing.
Ah, well, it was the risk I took with my prior position. You may or may not have heard that I was an unspeakable at the Ministry for years.
An unspeakable? What does...
As you might suspect, I cannot speak about what we did. Suffice it to say, the job was not without its hazards. I hope I've satisfied your curiosity for the moment.
You have. Thank you for speaking with me, Professor.
Keep up with your wand work. One must always be prepared for mischief, both inside and outside of the castle.
Professor, could you spare a moment?
How may I help you?
I'm interested in the goblin rebellions of the past.
Ah, certainly. Their history is part of our history. In fact, you can trace most goblin rebellions to wizard intervention. More specifically, the laws governing wands and who may legally possess them. The Goblin Rebellion of 1612, for example, arose from goblin frustration over lack of representation on the Wizengamot. It became a terrible, blood-soaked affair. Take heart, though. Our current peace and prosperity shows that violence can be transitory.
But Hogsmeade was just attacked, Professor.
If I'm not mistaken, and I rarely am, one of the 18th century's rebellions was led by Urg the Unclean. He had been dunked in a pond publicly by a group of young wizards, if you can imagine that. Another rebellion in 1752. The rebellion was so badly mishandled that Minister for Magic Albert Boot was forced to resign. That being said, his replacement, one Basil Flack, lasted mere weeks. Best sort of vindication, if you ask my opinion.
Please go on.
2 months into Flack's tenure, bad went to worse when the werewolves allied with the goblins. Quite smartly, Flack resigned rather than deal with their combined forces. Minister Flack was succeeded by one Hephaestus Gore, who quickly quashed the Jewel uprisings with his signature brutality. It is worth noting that many historians believe this punitive response led to even more werewolf conflict. You have noted all of this, have you not?
Oh yes, Professor. Please continue.
Continue? I take it your thirst for knowledge has yet to be quenched.
If you would be so kind, Professor Binns.
I rarely find an audience, captive or otherwise, eager to engage in such historical minutiae.
I find your lectures quite engaging, sir. Thank you for sharing your vast knowledge.
My sincere pleasure. Now, I do believe I should be preparing for my next class. Good day to you.